What's up guys, Leroy from NoiseGate, back in the NoiseGate studio. In front of me I have a couple of my favorite synths and drum machines right now. Korg Drumlogue, which is a hybrid digital analog drum machine, and I got the MiniFreak, which is a pretty crazy digital algorithmic synthesizer from Arturia. I've been loving the Drumlogue for its kind of, crazy sort of analog and digital sounds, and its kind of kooky programming, and the really interesting oscillators from the MiniFreak have been super nice. So in this video, I thought I would kind of bang the two together and sort of show how I kind of start a bit of a groove and explain kind of along the way sort of what I'm doing. So stay tuned. Let's get stuck into it. So whenever I'm starting a track, I like to start with drums. It's really nice to establish a bit of a groove to play with. But I should probably explain kind of what's going on here. I've got a very simple MIDI cable going from the MIDI out of the Drumlogue to the MIDI in of the MiniFreak. So whenever I press play, it will send clock and keep everything in time together. So I can kind of just create a loop and, create up some ideas. But let's start with the Drumlogue. So if I press the live button, can audition all the sounds. I've got a kind of a loose sort of sequence going already. Just some hats kind of like cycling around and around over a 16-step sequence. So it's probably a nice idea to kind of build upon this. So let's start with the kick, really establish the foundations of this groove. So with the Drumlogue, press the live to audition it. Press step, and now you're kind of in step sequencing mode, so you can put a kick in all the relevant steps in your sequence. So I'm going to go 5, 1, 5, 9, bleh, bleh. See how that sounds? Nice. The cool thing about the sequencer in the Drumlogue is you can kind of change the behavior of each steps within the sequence. So if I hold down a step, and I can change the alternation, so this little square icon now signifies that every second rotation this trigger will occur, all right? Kind of nice to use these kinds of things, kind of flips the script a little bit up and kind of keeps it kind of interesting as you kind of program your beats, right? Let's move on. So go back to live mode. Yep, let's get the clap. Step 5, 13. Nice. Let's go get some little percussive elements. So I'll go step, bang, bang. Oh, try that. See how that sounds? Now, if you've never used a Drumlogue before, this is a pretty basic way of sequencing, but if you need to sort of change or mix the parts as you go, you've got all these little volume pots up the top, so you can kind of, turn the kick up and bring some of the hats down if you want to. Plus, these little pots here allow you to kind of change the characteristics of the sounds, tuning and adding drive to the kick and decay to samples and whatever else, which is super nice. All right, and one last thing, I'm going to go to the snare. Whoops. Live, yep. Here we go. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to... Nope, that's not what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go step mode and bang all those in like this. Might have been on mute. Is it on mute? Let's see what's going on. Yep, it was on mute. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to use the snare to kind of create a snare roll, and I'm going to mute it and kind of bring it in so I can kind of use it as a performative kind of sound. But I don't want it to sound so rigid and stiff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the accent button and sort of change the accents of kind of every second step. And you can see the opacity of the lights on the little steps, colors kind of changes, which is a nice little touch. So you can kind of see what's going on. And the effect of this will be that not every step has kind of the same volume, which is, kind of what you want in a programmed sequence like this. Kind of gives it a little bit of extra swing, a little bit of extra je ne sais quoi. Here we go. And speaking about swing, let's go to the timing section, and let's go shift time and increase some of the swing as well. Maybe too much. right, so with that snare roll in there is obviously a bit too much, so let's just go back to live mode, hit mute, turn it off. And now I can kind of use the mute button to bring in parts and things. So it's a nice little way of kind of jamming with synths to kind of give you a bit of an idea on, you know, how you might structure these parts and whatever else. Cool, that sounds pretty cool for now. I might come back to it a bit later after I kind of move over to the MiniFreak. So I kind of want to get some sounds going. So on the MiniFreak, I've got an initialized patch. There we go, an initialized patch. It's just a very basic sort of analog sort of oscillator type, only using one of the oscillators. Super cool thing about the MiniFreak is there's two oscillators now. So the MicroFreak, which was its kind of little brother, is only a single oscillator. Not that that's a bad thing, but now I've got two. So on a sound design level, you've got a lot more scope for creating new and interesting sounds. So let's kind of start with oscillator. Actually, you know, let's turn down the volume of oscillator 1, go to oscillator 2, turn its volume up, and we'll change the oscillator type to so this is one of the noise engineering oscillator types. There was a bit of a collaboration, or they used their oscillators or whatever, and they sound real nice. So I'll turn the volume up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tune this down a couple of octaves, right? So I'm going to go down to like 24. So we're going to have like a bit of a bass note with this sort of sound, and I'm going to blend it with oscillator 2. And I'll turn the volume up of that. And let's just change the waveform of that. So let's change that to harmonic. Now let's just control the way these sort of sound a bit. Oh, what have I done? I've changed the oscillator. Here we go. What am I doing? There we go. So I've got that kind of nice, rich, subby note from oscillator 1 blended with oscillator 2. Let's open up the filter a bit. Alright, so oscillator 2, let's just kind of like open up a bit of this. And then oscillator 1, I think the shape knob adds a bit of noise. Cool. So you can kind of see just by sort of cycling between these two oscillators, it's kind of pretty easy to come up with something that's really, really usable. This harmonic oscillator, like as you cycle through waveform number 1, it kind of like adds some more harmonic content to that sound. And then when we introduce the filter, change some of the parameters on the envelope. Nice. I'm kind of looking for some sort of plucky sound that I can play in time with my groove. So speaking of the groove, let's fire this up and program in a chord. So hold down the chord button. Let's just program it. Alright, so it's kind of like a major or minor 7 chord. I don't know, you tell me. I'm not the musician, you are. Here we go. Get the arpeggiator and press hold. And then what's cool about having them clock together is when I press play on the Drumlogue, it will keep them all in sync. Cool. Let's go to the effects tab up here. Let's sort of chuck in some effects on this guy. How about some chorus to start with? That's kind of a nice idea. Effect slot 2. Really nice having like 3 effect slots on the MiniFreak. Each effect slot has like multiple effects types, so you're kind of not limited to just like 3. Delay, and let's go for a reverb on the end here. Why don't you just give me 1 second while I kind of flaff around with this and come up with the way I like it, and then we'll cut back into this in a second. All right, so here it is. So nice kind of plucky sort of bass, kind of stabby sound. And let's get this going with the drum machine. Now, currently the drum machine is just keeping this all in time, but the synth is just in arpeggiator mode being held just with those notes. A cool thing I like about the MiniFreak is you're able to actually record your arpeggiation into the sequencer. And that's a really cool thing because when you're in the sequencer, you're able to do a whole lot of other new things. So let's do that. All you need to do is just press down the record button, and as it cycles through the arpeggiator, it will record it into the sequencer. There we go. So I might just turn this down for 1 second. Turn off the arpeggiator. So now the arpeggiator is programmed into the sequencer, which means I can kind of do a whole lot of new creative things, like punching holes in it. I can just start taking steps out to kind of like change up the rhythm. Pretty cool stuff. This kind of gives you the ability to sort of like jam out for a little while and really experiment with all the parameters from the arpeggiator that's been recorded into the sequencer. And it's all nicely and stays in time. I might just mention a couple of cool things with the sequencer. So when you hold down a step, you can change the length with the little sliders. You can change the step length. But I've also got this macro control set up here. And what this does is it allows me to use the touch strip to modulate multiple parameters. I believe it's 4 per strip. And in this scenario, I've got the cutoff and decay mapped to the same strip. So I could kind of then just play it in normally like... But it comes to the sequencer, I'm able to actually like record that in as a lane of automation. So this here is the modulation lane. So when you press this and hit record, you can then kind of make parameter movements and it will record that into the sequencer. Now again, the cool thing about this is you can actually punch holes in the automation as well. So you can kind of just like take bits out to kind of change up the way that the automation behaves throughout the sequence. This is really useful stuff for me. I kind of like just jam out a lot using these kinds of techniques. I'll then record these into clips into Ableton and kind of piece them into kind of like the broader arrangement of an overall track. Certainly a really useful way of coming up with ideas I probably wouldn't have thought of doing had I not had these kinds of like tips and techniques within the sequencer. I hope this helps. Thanks for tuning in the video. If you have any questions, bang them in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.